Right, apologies, Angela, you were in the middle of a question.
Do we have to get the report again or no? That'd be okay. Oh, good. No, so no. So thank you and apologies that we've had to change room, Fiona, and put your style. The current arrears, as you say, it's like over £250,000. That's a lot of money. And I know it's steadily gone up. And you did say that there's a lot of engagement with tenants that are in arrears. It says there's 1,118 houses, and I worked out during the break, from which might be wrong, on table 3, the breakdown of the current arrears. It adds up to 435. So is that 435 houses that are in arrears? But that didn't work out 6%. Or am I just? Is that how many out there?
That'll be the households. Yeah.
That's the number of households. That's a lot of our tenants that are in arrears, even though maybe the 310, a lot of those may be technical arrears. And I know from speaking to some of the housing officers that there is a lot of work that is going on to support people, but there are others that are just not engaging. What happens with those that are not engaging? Is that the ones that get the final letter saying they could be evicted if they don't engage? Because I've heard some stories which, people are just not facing up to the fact that they have to pay the rent. And I know they may have some other money troubles, but we do signpost them to CAB and to a welfare rights team, because we still do that, don't we? Yeah. And the other was on the antisocial behaviour. We've seen an increase in our ward and in other wards as well. There's been a big increase. How has Safer Ross helped with some of this? And have we ever, or would the council ever evict anyone that has, is creating a lot of antisocial behaviour and upsetting their neighbours? Has that ever happened? And how closely do we work with our other housing colleagues in Alban, Cairn, etc.? Because there are some that have been ongoing for a number of years and we don't seem to make any progress on them. I'll not say which, but you will know. Thank you. I'll do just now.
So just to touch on the void repairs, as I mentioned, we did have some new build developments. So usually that will lead to transfer applications as well. So it's an increase in the voids that we would have. So we'd have our normal void turnover from allocations coming back through natural routes, but also then the addition of transfer applicants as well. So that increases the number of void properties that are going through the system. So that can slow things down slightly as well. Years we do a lot of engagement with our clients, as you know. We do referrals to the welfare support team. We also have an intensive support officer as well. So if we're really not getting engagement from our tenants, sometimes that contact from welfare support team or intensive support officer is somebody different. So sometimes that can prompt engagement as well. And they can do all the referrals to make sure that they're getting all the benefits maximised, debt advice, perhaps referrals to Citizens Advice Bureau if there's more serious debts that need dealt with, and through other methods. So non-engagement is quite a bit of an issue for our officers, but the message is always there that we're here to help and we can help, but we need the tenants to engage with us so that we can work our way forward. And that shows that although that we're issuing quite a number of notices, we do get engagement and we do find solutions. So that prevents us from having to then proceed on to court action. So that's just a sort of a testament to the work that the housing officers do. We are to be introducing a further housing management officer post for a fixed period of 12 months. Yes, it's in the reduction of 3 years. So hopefully we'll see an improvement once that's post has been advertised and filled. And antisocial behaviour, you're right, there is an increase across the whole of your Highland area. And we do work with Safer Ross, so we have the weekly meetings with Safer Ross. Kieran and Alvin representatives are also invited to attend those as well. So it's good for ourselves because tenants don't always report to ourselves about what's happening in their area. So that will give us the first indication that something's happened in the past week. It gives us information about who was involved. Sometimes it will let us know if there were charges raised. That's really good for officer safety as well because it gives us an awareness of there might be issues starting to arise in a property that we're not aware of, and it might be something we deem to visit, but it might highlight some issues with us as well. And if there is any cross working between Alvin and Kieran, we do make contact with them and we do try to tackle things together, but it can be difficult and complex ones can take quite a long time. We do work with other agencies as well if there's referrals needed to social work, for example, mental health teams. There's also referrals that we can do to almost like self-help groups for various addictions, mental health issues, and that types of things. There's lots of, do try to take a holistic view, not just antisocial behaviour, but early years and tenancy management in general.
Hold on, if you just keep yourself here to feel it, but it's similar to, and I'm trying to get behind these figures now. So that they aren't just figures. So 25, 26, Q1, we've got 53 notices of proceedings issued, 3 court actions initiated and no evictions. What are we to read into that? Are we to read into that that the 3 court actions that are initiated were successful and we regained the money, and that leaves 50 people? What are 50 households? What do we read into that? Do we read in that that's successful housing management intervention that allows that to go away, if you like?
Yes, because as I say, we do focus on early intervention, but sometimes it's not until somebody gets the court summons that they will actually make contact with us. And, they do tend to bury their head in the sand a little bit. Prior to court, they'll be offered a pre-court interview with myself. So that's another opportunity to come in and have a look at their situation, see if we can find a solution. If they put an agreement in place at that point, we don't proceed to court. As long as they maintain it, but they are made aware that if the repayment agreement fails, then we will proceed with court action. Even after court, so they might go to court and get an open decree of eviction. We then offer another opportunity to come in and speak with myself. Similar again, what can we do to help? Let's look at their situation. There's the referrals that need to be done. Can we maximise income to put a repayment agreement in place? So although we've gone to court in Q1 3 times, in Q2 5 times, we've resolved that. So it could be that they've paid in full. It could be that they've put a repayment agreement in that we're monitoring. So it means that we've had some success and we haven't had to move to the final action.
That's what I wanted to hear.
So it is positive.
We're reporting a positive
Yeah,
eviction.
absolutely.
And the only thing that's not that be positive in my view, and I'm fully supportive of your procedures, is if there were repeat offenders, so that we get notice of proceedings issued across the quarters to the same people. Or would,
Quite possibly,
yeah.
yes, because they could well put a repayment agreement in place to avoid court action, and they could, in good faith, be maintaining that, and they could have a change in circumstances and it fails, or it could be that they've made an offer of repayment and the payments have never started.
So if the eviction would only come with someone says no, I'll not pay.
Yeah, that's our absolute final, and we will exhaust all avenues to prevent that for our tenants. So it's testament to the really dedicated team that we have there. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
I've got to make some comment about the antisocial behaviour. I'm not convinced that your figures are right, because I think there's a hell of a lot more people out there are scared to come and report things, because a lot of the antisocial behaviour probably comes from streets or even neighbours and things like that. And to ask people to come forward and make a complaint so you could, or the police can take action and things like that. If you're staring down the face of some of these people who are causing this antisocial behaviour, you need balls of steel to be able to come out to your house and you to do that. So I'm not 100% sure that your figures are right. I think it's there's a bigger situation going on that you were made aware of. I mean, I know how many people could come to me and say that I think people are absolutely scared, and I do sometimes think that they don't get listened to when they do come and make a complaint. And I think that we need to get a bit more robust with some of the antisocial behaviour that go on. I know I've come and spoken to you about things like that, so it's nothing that I suppose you didn't expect to hear from me. So a lot of people come to me, and if people are listening to it, I've got to say something, because people quite often think that if people come and complain to even us that we don't do anything about it, you know. So if anybody's listening out there, I've said a little bit. So you know, I will keep going on about it when I hear it. You know, I speak to people who are really absolutely scared and petrified to even come out of their houses. Anyway, that's about all I've got to say for that.
Yeah, and I would agree, there probably is a lot that goes unreported, both to ourselves and the police. But if tenants are not letting us and what's going on, we have nothing to act on. And if we are going to proceed with antisocial behaviour investigations, we need that evidence. We need people to be letting us know what's happening, so that we can work with the police and other agencies to address it appropriately. But I totally do understand that people will have repercussions.
I think possibly the police don't do what they should do when they go to some of these incidents and things like that. Yeah, you know, the police see a lot of what's going on, and they probably have enough evidence without having to get petrified. And it's quite often older people, you know, more vulnerable people that are affected by it.
Yeah, and I would reassure them that when they're reporting things to ourselves, they can ask to remain anonymous. And then we can be very careful then when we're making contact with them or doing visits, so that it's not obvious. That's
Something done. Thank you. Yes.
Right. Any other questions?
Nope.
Okay, thanks very much.
and thank you all for your time.
You got too much of it after. But we've with us this morning on our agenda item 5, short-term let control area. Steve McGuire, over to you, Steve.
Share my screen if that's easier. Great. So I'll run through this item quickly. The report has obviously been provided to you in advance. So the short-term net control area is an item that all area committees are being asked to consider in this particular committee cycle. I think for the public records, we're not having the best technical time at the moment, it's just worth reviewing what exactly a short-term net control area can and cannot do. And so I suppose in a nutshell, it ensures that all changes of use from houses into short-term lets would require planning permission. And that's currently not the case unless you are in a short-term let control area. And it would therefore mean that any future conversions of housing to short-term let would always require planning permission. It would be brought within the scope of the planning system. And this should not be interpreted as a ban, because the planning applications for future conversions are simply determined in accordance with the appropriate planning policy, which is already used in Badenoch and Strathspey's short-term let control area. So there are some examples in which those conversions from housing to short-term lets are supported in those policies. So it doesn't control existing properties that are currently used as short-term lets where no change of use had actually happened at the time of establishment. It doesn't control second homes, which are not considered a short-term let. It doesn't control purpose-built tourism accommodation, such as pods, chalets, annexes, because those are structures that require planning permission anyway, because you need permission to build newly erected structures. So this policy that's used in Badenoch and Strathspey is here. It also gives you some criteria for the instances where we would support the use of a dwelling to be used as a short-term let. So you can see examples of where there's evidence that it has been previously long-term empty or located above vacant commercial units within town and village centres. So the statutory process of designating a short-term let control area follows a separate set of regulations. So the planning authority has to undertake a notification and a consultation. So we have to go to the public with our proposed boundary, showing which areas and which people living within those areas would be affected by the proposal, and what is the local authority's statement of reasons for this designation. We have to then review that feedback, submission and approval to the Scottish ministers to obtain their approval. And then once we've received their approval, if we did receive that approval, we would have a further period of publicity to alert the public that this would be coming into force within a 28-day period at minimum. So the council's internal process agreed in September to do so was to note the following items on the screen, but then also to agree that the first stage in our process in the Highland Council would be for the area committees to decide whether or not they sought all or part of their area to be considered within a future short-term let control area before the subsequent steps in relation to launching consultations, submission to ministers, and the final designation to designate. All of those subsequent stages would be taken by E&I committee. So this is the one stage in the process, which is that first stage, which is for the area committee to decide whether there is a justification for E&I considering this for Dingwall and Seaforth. So then the report subsequently presents evidence to members specific to the Dingwall and Seaforth Area Committee. It reviews several pieces of data that have been used within the Highland Council's full report in September. So the Dingwall and Seaforth Area Committee falls within the Mid-Ross housing market area. So it's part of a bigger housing market area, which is basically where people would be seeking to live within this immediate area. So it also includes ourselves and the Ward 9 in the Black Isle as well. What we're looking at here is that in contrast with other areas in Highland, Mid-Ross has a very high rate of what we call containment. So it means that basically 18% of property sales within the Mid-Ross housing market area were purchased by people who already lived in the Highland Council. And actually 45% of them were actually purchased by people who already live in Mid-Ross. So we don't have a very strong rate of sales from out with the Highland Council area. We have 33% of property sales out with the Highland Council area. And when you look at the stock profile of ineffective stock, the Mid-Ross area has a lower percentage of long-term empty, second homes and short-term let licensed properties than Highland as a whole, and in contrast to other areas within Highland. So this is consistent with other findings, because what we tend to see is the areas that have really low rates of containment, so very high rates of external sales, also therefore have high rates of second homes and short-term lets, but that's not what we're seeing in Mid-Ross. So it's therefore by extension not what we're seeing in Dingwall and Seaforth. When we look at the housing market area and how it's performing, the council officers are already undertaking a housing need and demand assessment. So it's a very timely stage to prepare this information for members, because a lot of this work is already underway as part of what the council is doing to assess our housing need and demand for the next 10 and 20 years. So as part of this, we've looked at the property sales transactions of over 18,000 properties transactions across Highland for the last 5 years. When we specifically look at the ones in Mid-Ross, what we do see is that the market entry house price, which is the price houses are initially put on the market at in the area, is slightly higher than the Highland average. The average house price, which is what properties actually sell for in the area, is again slightly higher than the Highland average price. The income, therefore, to afford both the market entry and the average house prices is slightly higher in the area. But this doesn't seem to be driven by loss of stock to short-term lets. So we have less than half of the equivalent rate of short-term lets that Highland does. So there are potentially other factors here at play in terms of why our housing market is slightly less affordable. And bearing in mind, this includes elements of the Black Isle, places where properties would be slightly less affordable than perhaps in the Dingwall and Seaforth area committee as well. So when we look at the profile of short-term lets in the area, we do see that the majority of the 97 short-term lets could be used as potential dwellings. So out of the 97, 80 were converted from dwellings. And 17 are unconventional, so pods and chalets, structures which almost certainly would have required planning permission anyway. When we look at new build completions that have been finished within this area, the column in the middle shows you the total number of houses that were built every year for the last 5 years in the ward, and how many were actually then appearing subsequently on the short-term let license register. As you can see, these are absolutely tiny numbers. It's only one property. So we're not seeing evidence really that properties are being lost in any significant number to short-term lets in this area. When we look at the profile of short-term lets, not surprisingly, we see an area where in green, most of them would be detached properties. Some areas where the majority would actually be unconventional accommodation, such as pods and chalets. And when we get into Dingwall itself, the majority are self-contained flats. But when we look at the rates of potential dwellings that are used as short-term lets, all of these, almost all of them, apart from one data zone which starts to leave this area committee and fall under the Wester Ross area. I mean, all of the remaining ones in this area are within the Highland average or lower than the Highland average. When we look at where the rates of short-term lets are actually growing the fastest, we do see rates of growth, and we are seeing some areas growing faster than the Highland average, but the number that we're actually talking about of short-term let units is very small in real terms. So we're looking at a doubling between 2 to 4, which seems like a 100% increase, but these are actually very small rates. So we've looked at then for the areas that are growing faster than the Highland average for 1 and 2 consecutive years. Given that there are rates of growth, but yet no areas that are actually high, the item recommendations therefore in front of members reflect that it would be worth reviewing what the evidence says on this matter at a subsequent period in 12 months. We've also consulted the area place plan and the registered local place plan for the areas. So it doesn't mention any specific concerns over short-term let control. It does mention in the Black Isle LPP, which small area of which falls within the Dingwall and Seaforth area, particularly near the Cromarty Bridge. We're looking at, a mention of short-term let control and concern over second homes. But given that the majority of that LPP is for a neighbouring area, and that we're not seeing this reflected in the empirical evidence for Dingwall and Seaforth, I would afford limited weight to that in taking that particular plan forward. The area place plan for Dingwall and Seaforth specifically doesn't make mention of short-term lets as a concern within the plan. And there are no notified local place plans within the Dingwall and Seaforth area, so we have no public record of community concerns on short-term lets in the area. I was informed the recommendations in the report in front of members today that this is not of a scale or magnitude that was justifying a short-term let control area in Dingwall and Seaforth. But given that we are seeing some rates of change, it would be worth looking at the evidence at a subsequent period if members sought that to be brought back to the area committee. Okay.
Thanks, been very full and comprehensive. Any questions, members?
Oh, I think we got a briefing
Yeah,
before.
we got a briefing before. This is just to formalise it through the area committee. So I'm going to ask to agree that we do not apply for a short-term licence and then we look at again in 12 months' time. Agreed.
Agreed.
Do that. Yep. Thanks very much, Maeve.
Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, very helpful.
Technical issues are resolved.
Okay, moving on. In item 6, Demo Common Good one.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. A straightforward report. This is the Q2 monitoring report. The detail is. You can expect a more full report from the next quarter where we need to set the budget. Chair.
Okay, Angela.
No, it's quite straightforward.
No, it's a very straightforward report. As you say, it'll come as a more, a fuller report next time round, so I could eat that. Then item 7, Dingwall and Seaforth Ward discretionary budget applications approved for the last meeting. You have them in front of you. I agree that is as reported.
Agreed.
Agreed. And that then just leaves us with the minutes. That's the last meeting, 25th of August 25, which was approved by the council, so that's just for noting. So
Mhm.
that's it. Thanks, Chair.
Just a separate question. Given that next year is Dingwall 800, at our first one of the new year, could we maybe get an update at committee? I know we've had briefings at our ward business meeting, but they're not in public. It will be
Briefing from.
from either Face
Face
Ross
Ross.
or DCDC or someone, because our next meeting's when,
I think it's
Big
the 9th of February.
yeah, so we'll have had the launch and we'll be in the second month, and it's just to maybe highlight some of the upcoming projects that will be coming.
That's a good idea. Plus, we'll know by then the
What's-
funding applications.
Yes,
I think we're through to the next stage. of
that's right.
funding applications.
Fiona mentioned that.
So that would give us clarity on that. And by then we'll have had, I suspect, our first event, which was the projection of all those pictures that were taken in Robert's House.
That's
I
right.
think that's scheduled for January,
Mhm.
although I don't have an exact date.
And the other was on, and perhaps it's going to be on the agenda, the Dingwall Hub. You know, we've talked about it at our ward business meetings, but maybe get, if there's a possibility of a report on how things are progressing, because there's lots of different rumours. What is a hub?
Yeah.
What's it for? You know, maybe if we had a presentation, because Scott's coming to see us about properties in Dingwall, and, you know, there's different things happening, but to have an actual report for Dingwall and Seaforth, that would be really good.
Well, as you know, the decision will be taken on the 11th of December, so that would be a very appropriate time to get a report and a feedback given. So
Is that okay with everybody then?
okay, well, thanks for your attendance.